All right, all right, all right. You gonna learn today.
Hey y'all, what's up? So, gotta make sure my necklace showing. Where is it at? Okay, there we go. This is giving. You see my little infinity symbol? Infinite love, okay? But y'all didn't come here for that. So I am super excited to bring today's teaching to you, okay? As y'all can see the title, it says forgiveness is overrated. So this is the first part of a 5-part teaching series about forgiveness, okay? And I'm really excited about this. If you guys were on the previous ministry page, you know that I used to do sessions with forgiveness. I even did workshops with forgiveness and different teachings to teach you guys the importance of forgiveness, okay? So a lot of you will have questions throughout this series. Just know every question just about that you could ask about forgiveness, it will be covered in this 5-part series. So I don't, and we may even add a bonus, okay? But I don't want you guys to miss it, all right? I'm going to make these teachings, most teachings with Sunray, short and concise, because I believe in potency, in that if you get a concentrated teaching and you spend time with it, that it'll speak to your spirit, but it won't take up all of your day, okay? All right, with that said, let's get on into it. So, forgiveness is overrated. So the first thing I want to talk about with forgiveness is that Jade always got to make her appearance, that we live in a culture right now where forgiveness almost seems as if you're weak. It's like everyone's okay with walking around carrying this burden on their back, because essentially having an unforgiving spirit, that's exactly what it is. You carry around these burdens. And so when we become co-heirs of Christ, a part of that kingdom is expanding our mindset to become more like Christ, right? And if we want to become more like Christ, a large part of that is forgiveness. For each of us, we're adopted underneath the grace covenant, right? Pretty much meaning that beforehand, we had to keep up with all these laws. We had to do all of these different things just to get an entryway to heaven, and our sin kept us separate from God. But when Jesus died on the cross for our sins, it was so that we could be forgiven underneath this grace covenant. We have grace now that allows us to go beyond the veil and to enter this deep, intimate place with God. But guess what? None of that would not have been possible without forgiveness. And so first, I wanted to highlight that. I believe it's Matthew 18:22, where it talks about,
hey, Jesus, how many times should I forgive people? 7 times? Yeah, that's about it. I got about 7 times in me. Just 7 times?
Try 70 times 7.
What? 70 times 7?
So what Jesus was saying with forgiveness is that when we speak about forgiveness, we're like, oh, I forgive you, right? But the next day, you're right back to not forgiving that person, the next week, the next year. Because let me tell you, forgiveness and the act of forgiving are 2 totally different things. The act of forgiving, it's like a one-time thing. It's like, I forgive you. But forgiveness is when you take that one-time act of forgiveness, or that act of forgiving, and you make it infinite, which means every single time this situation comes up, I forgive you. Every single time something comes up that puts me in this place where I want to hold you into bondage, I forgive you. Right? So it's like this continuous thing about forgiveness. So forgiveness and the act of forgiving are different, because one is a one-time act. But if you turn that one-time act into something continuous, infinite, that never ends, you've now entered into the mind state of forgiveness. Now, with me saying all of this, I kind of forgot to tell y'all the Greek meaning of forgiveness, or to forgive someone, right? So there's like a few different words that's used, but they all carry the same meaning, okay? So the word that I'm going to highlight to you guys today is aphesis, A-P-H-E-S-I-S. It sounds like thesis, right? Or antithesis, but a thesis. And pretty much what that means is that you're releasing someone or something from bondage. And another meaning of that word is actually deliverance. So if forgiveness is a release, then that means that unforgiveness is bondage. That means that you're holding on to something. That means that there's baggage, right? And so that's the reason why we want to be more like Christ and to operate in forgiveness, because we're releasing, we're not holding on to the things that people have done to us, okay? And so very briefly, I wanted to go over, well, the Holy Spirit wanted me to point something out about the story of Joseph. So as you guys can see, the title is Forgiveness is Overrated. But let me tell you why forgiveness is not overrated. When we look at the story of Joseph, we know exactly what happened to him, what his brothers did. If you don't, definitely take some time to go over his story. I believe it starts in Genesis 37 and it goes practically all the way up to the end of Genesis, okay? And so the whole point is that his brothers do something to him. Now, the thing is that on the outside looking in at first, it can appear that Joseph was like, okay, it's a bridge over troubled water. Like, it's cool. They did this, but I'm fine. I'm going to keep going. But when we look at him being in jail, it was Genesis, when he was in jail, which one was it? Genesis 40:15. So this was when he was interpreting the dream. He said, or we're going to read 14. But when all goes well with you, remember me and show me kindness. Mention me to Pharaoh and get me out of this prison. I'm locked up. They won't let me out. He said, I was forcibly carried off from the land of the Hebrews. And even here, I have done nothing to deserve being put in a dungeon. So the one thing God wanted me to highlight in this particular teaching about why forgiveness isn't overrated is that forgiveness, it causes a film, it causes a layer, it causes a hardening to cover your heart. And what happens when something covers your heart? It taints your perception. We see Paul pray for this with the Ephesus church. It was Ephesians 1:17. And in his prayer, what he said was, he said, God, I pray that you will allow the light of Christ to shine into the eyes of their hearts, to widen or open their understanding. So when we carry this spirit of unforgiveness, which I don't think is a word, but whatever. When you carry an unforgiving spirit, what ends up happening is that it taints your perception of what you've gone through. Because all he could think about was, yo, they locked me up in jail, threw me away the key. They done did this to me. Not even they locked me up in jail. First of all, I'm sorry. They sold him away. Let's talk about that. The fact that he didn't talk about what happened in Bathsheba's house, in Potiphar's house. I said Bathsheba. Oh my gosh. The Potiphar's wife ain't even got a name. That's how important she was. I had to make up one. I'm sorry. But with Potiphar's wife, right? He didn't talk about what happened there. What did he choose to talk about? He talked about the very beginning. So even with all the other things that happened to him, he's in jail right now. The only thing he could think about was the very thing that his brothers did. So that showed you his heart. That showed you he did not let it go. And further going, why forgiveness isn't overrated is, one, it tainted his vision. It tainted his perception. At that point, he could have chosen to see the purpose for what he went through. But at that time, it just wasn't clear to him, okay? Then when he encountered his brothers, what happened? He tested them. He like, yo, oh, I'm the big man now. I'm finna see if they truly sorry. But it caused him to do these unnecessary tests and things like that. I mean, it was necessary, right? Because it showed that they actually had learned from their mistakes. But it also went against allowing God to reveal all things, allowing God to work. Because he didn't know that God had already worked on them. That's why they protected Benjamin so much, because they knew what they did to their brother was wrong, and they had learned this, right? Which would have come out with time had Joseph still not had this hardening on his heart. But our Father is good. He will work all things together for our good. Even when we, hold on to unforgiveness and try and put people through different tests, hoops and loops just to prove themselves. And that's why he continued to weep. That's another reason why it's not overrated, because that was his release. I counted. He wept a total of 3 times. 3, we know, represents resurrection, new life, transfer. A transfer from the old into the new, right? A new birth. And for Joseph, those tears that he held, like he held this on for so long, for so many years. And in that moment, while he was testing his brothers and he just started to cry, that was the release. But it couldn't help but make me wonder, what if Joseph released those tears way before? So when they came, it was just an opportunity to reconnect, an opportunity to say, hey, like, I'm your brother, like, yo, I'm alive, like, go get dad, you know? But again, God works all things together for our good. But the thing is that forgiveness wasn't overrated in his case, because you can see that he needed it. It taunted him. Even in prison, he continues to think about that. But also, too, when he came and encountered his brothers, he began to test them unnecessarily, right? Because God had already did a work. My thing is are you struggling to forgive someone because you don't trust that God can do a work in them, that God can change their perception, right? Do you believe that you have to test them and hold on to this anger or hold on to this situation to try and prove a point, right? Okay. And then the other thing is that, did I mention this? It shuts off your vision. I don't know if I mentioned that in like my recap. Okay. But this is some questions, or these are some questions I want to leave you with. If forgiveness is truly overrated, like how it is in our society, then why is it mentioned at least over 100 times in the Bible? And I'm speaking about forgiveness, forgive. In some way, the word forgive is mentioned at least 100 times in the Bible. And another question I wrote down is, if forgiveness is truly overrated, then why does carrying an unforgiving spirit keep you in bondage? Remember, the Greek word aphesis is for forgiveness, deliverance, set free from bondage. So if you carry the opposite of that, you're in bondage. You need to be delivered. Okay, you ain't free no more. You need to be delivered. And so from that, it's not always about demonic things or whatever. A lot of emotional wounds that we're harboring with what people done in the past to us is keeping us bound, and it's keeping us tied to something that God no longer wants us to be tied to. So in today's teaching, my main point was to open it up to you to say that forgiveness is actually not overrated, literally to prove to you the opposite of this title. But in the next few teachings, we're going to go from, so today you learn what forgiveness is. We're going to discuss, why do you need to forgive? How to forgive? A lot of you guys may ask that question, Sunray, how do I forgive? Remember what I said at the beginning. Any question that you could think about asking pretty much that pertains to forgiveness, we're going to discuss it in this series. So make sure that you stay tuned. I'm going to be releasing videos probably every day or every other day. Just know it's going to go between this week and next week. But anywho, I pray that this teaching has blessed you. If you learned something new today, share that below, drop it below. Or if God has taught you something about forgiveness as we progress through this series, definitely share with the people below. I love you guys so much. And y'all learned today.
All right. You gonna learn today.